First up on our list, we have someone who, what's it called? Want to call a local? I've written the word for a regular here. Is Mr. Gary Flinn going to be reading out of some of his books, I believe. All right, come on up, Gary.
Okay. Just pass around. All right. Thank you. A lot has happened this month. Earlier this month, I was invited by the Whaley House to do a slideshow presentation about Christmases past in Flint. It was a full house. Everyone enjoyed it. They loved the old photos that I shared in the slideshow, and I had a little bit of access to Wi-Fi, so I was able to look up some old pictures of, for example, J.C. Penney, Smith Bridgman's, and all that. Everyone had fun, and just yesterday, I went to Saginaw. I was invited to sit in on a scheduled book club discussion of my second book, Hidden History of Flint. And everyone enjoyed the book, by the way. It was a nice read. They loved to talk about the water crisis, for example. And by the way, one of the emergency financial managers, Darnell Early, who I would give one of the part of the blame for the water crisis in the first place, before he became emergency financial manager here, he was Saginaw City manager. So they were very familiar with him. So afterwards, I took a tour of Saginaw's Castle Museum, which is historical. It was the original post office in Saginaw, and if you're ever in Saginaw, I highly recommend taking in the Castle Museum. It was depicted on that episode of Under the Radar Michigan on public television, for example. Now, tonight, it's a little heavy heart. We recently lost retired attorney Marvin Failer, who is mentioned in my first book, Remembering Flint, Michigan, Stories from the Vehicle City. And his parents, they ran a grocery store in this very spot we're sitting and standing in. So, in fact, that's probably where that 7-Up sign on the wall came out of. So,
was the whole thing? Was the whole thing a grocery store, or was it just this half?
I think it was this part.
And that half was something different.
I think it was something different. I think also.
No, that was the grocery store next door.
That was the grocery store.
So that was the grocery store
different.
too. Okay, and the piece is a bit of history. I passed along some magazine covers. One nice thing about eBay, you can find most anything and everything, including some of the magazines depicted in this piece I'm going to read about the Bookstore Raids of October 1963. And I'm going to send these magazine covers over to Jenny, so as I read these magazines, she can insert the covers in the video. It'll appear eventually on Comcast Channel 17, which airs Monday evenings at 6 p.m. So here's the piece. Let's go back to a more innocent time, before the 1960s became turbulent. It's the fall of 1963, shortly before we lost that innocence when President Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd. The lead figure in this tale is Genesee County's young and ambitious prosecutor, Robert F. Leonard. Leonard organized a citizens committee to help rid Genesee County newsstands of, quote, obscene and pornographic, unquote, literature. Today, of course, adults can access the internet or go into the 18 or over closets in video stores to see porn that is much more graphic than what Leonard was going after. The work Leonard led bore fruit on October 9th when Flint police detectives and members of Leonard's staff raided 4 bookstores and arrested 2 bookstore owners and an employee. A 4th person was arrested the following day. The bookstores raided were the downtown Listag Shop at 310 South Saginaw, Readmore Newsstand at 730 North Saginaw, and the Book Nook at 203 North Saginaw, and Bookmark at 3308 Corona on the west side of town. Several boxes of magazines and books that Leonard said were obscene were confiscated. The stores were padlocked to allow members of his staff to examine the books and magazines inside. Titles Leonard mentioned included Fabulous Femmes, Lace Undies, Caper, Dynamic Nudist, Nudist Colorama, Gentleman, Ace, Black Satin, Gent, Swank, Modern Man, Big Show, Heat Wave, Art Films, High Heels, Honey, Cloud 9, Feline, Sun Era, Satana, and Nighty. The list of magazine titles showed that what was called pornography by Leonard in 1963 was mild and could be considered soft porn today. They are mainly girly or nudist magazines. The charges were circuit court misdemeanors with the maximum penalty of a $1,000 fine and 1 year in jail. The padlocks were removed on October 12th. 1 month later, Municipal Judge Basil Baker granted a petition by the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, to act as a friend of the court. The petitions were filed by attorneys Harry Newblatt and Marvin Failer. Newblatt and Failer acted on behalf of the Book Nook's operator. The first defendant in court pleaded guilty to the charge of lending an obscene motion picture on October 28th. He was an employee of Leigh Stagg and had lent the film to an undercover agent for a fee. On December 10th, he was put on 1 year's probation by Judge Stuart A. Newblatt. The trials for the three remaining defendants took place the following April. Leonard suffered a setback on April 9th when Judge John D. Parker criticized the prosecutor's office and law enforcement officials for padlocking one of the bookstores, as the contents were not obscene in his opinion, but were instead coarse and vulgar. Judge Parker dismissed the charges against the owner of Leigh Stagg Shop. The seized merchandise was ordered returned. Leonard decided to try a new line of attack, concentrating on films and paperback books rather than magazines. Leonard suffered another setback when Judge Stuart Newblatt dismissed the charge against the owner of the Bookmark, agreeing with Judge Parker about the earlier dismissal. Judge Stuart Newblatt was Harry Newblatt's brother, so a defense attorney from Detroit, Ernest Goodman, was brought in. Judge Newblatt granted two motions by Goodman, one stating that the magazines were seized illegally and could not be used, and the other asking for dismissal of the charge. Judge Newblatt also quashed the search warrant and ordered the seized magazines returned. The charge against the Book Nook operator was dismissed on April 27th by Judge John W. Baker, who ruled that the search warrant for the Book Nook raid was invalid and the publication seized did not violate state law. The merchandise was ordered returned to the Book Nook's operator. Judge Baker concurred with the other judges that the publications were coarse and vulgar, but not obscene. As for what became of the bookstores, Leigh Stagg and Book Nook did not survive 1964, although the Leigh Stagg location in the Sunland building where the Royal Theatre, which showed adult movies, was located, housed other adult bookstores until it was torn down in 1973 to make room for an addition to Citizens Bank. The Bookmark on Corona Road became Front Page Book Center in 1979 before it closed. The address was occupied by a bakery in 1983. Today that location is a dusty, little-used office next to a life insurance agency. It is the only former bookstore building still standing. Readmore, the only bookstore not prosecuted, also lasted several years, moving into a nearby larger location at 714 North Saginaw in 1972. It became a Front Page Book Center in 1981. It was forced to close to make way for the ill-fated Auto World. Marvin Failer was with the law firm of Beakey, Failer, O'Callahan, and Zinsmaster in Flushing until he retired. Harry P. Newblatt was elected district court judge for the newly formed Flushing District Court in 1968. Judge Harry Newblatt acquired the nickname of Hurry Up Harry because of his reputation in keeping the court moving along to deal with his caseload. He was re-elected in 1972, 1978, and 1984 before retiring from the bench in 1989. He died on April 10, 1972 at age 76. As for prosecutor Robert Leonard, he unsuccessfully ran for circuit court judge in 1966. Despite the setbacks, he had success as county prosecutor, bringing him national attention with his innovative ideas to improve justice and reduce court backlogs. He also set up consumer protection and white-collar crime programs that were copied elsewhere. His downfall was in managing public funds. A fund set up to pay informants of organized crime and drug dealing had $34,000 missing, and a federal grand jury indicted him. He was convicted in 1979 of tax evasion and embezzlement, thus stripped of his job as county prosecutor, and was sentenced in 1980 to 5 years in prison and fined $15,000. He was released after serving 44 months in a federal penitentiary. Admitting he made mistakes, Leonard attempted a political comeback in 1987 when he ran for 5th Ward City Councilman, but he lost to incumbent Councilman Matt Taylor. And that's my piece. By the way, even though this book came out in 2010, I have not heard from Robert Leonard. However, when I asked Marvin Failer when I was writing this piece for The Uncommon Sense, he did not recall being involved in the bookstore defense back in 1963. So that's my piece for this month, and I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gary.